as hard as me, so I only kind of felt like it was, and not to say that I'm not like that I'm better than them, but I know I work harder than a lot of these guys, so I know like I'm gonna get more out of just working on my own than I would like working with somebody. You know what I mean? So, but no, it's good to get in the habit of doing this with a group as well, because just because I study a lot doesn't mean there's not things that I'm going to learn from other people who are in there grinding. I mean, just like just even if you don't like study a lot but you play a lot, you're still going to have a good understanding of player tendencies and how the regulars in your game are playing, and that's something that like Pio and Odin aren't going to be able to solve for you because it can only play against itself, not against like randoms in the game. So still a lot of value that can be made from these things too. So we're getting some people in here. What's up, Reacher? Oh, I guess I'll ask. Sorry to cut you off. I was gonna say I'll ask the guys what they would rather do. What I have queued up right now. This is the final table of a 10K on Stars, I believe. Yeah, EPT. So this has been hosted by Stars with I'm pretty sure, the current MTT GOAT, Michael Adamo. And so we could look over this. This is just cards up replayer of a final table. So we'll get to see how, like, not only Adamo, but all these other guys are pretty much legends in here as well. I think the only unknown is I've never heard of this version guy, but all these other guys are very strong MTT players. So I think it would be good to look over these, not only just to see how they're playing, but how they're playing at a final table, and maybe some decisions that might look a little interesting because of the final table dynamic. So we could either look at this or we could look over Pluribus. I guess let me know in the chat, guys. Have you guys ever heard of Pluribus before? Okay, no from Fountain and Flood. Oh, by the way, guys, we are chatting in the for you guys just coming in here. We are chatting in the poker seminar section. So if you want to talk to us at all, we'll have that section up and be checking you guys' questions. So feel free to ask anything while we're going over this. Is that GovShark? Dude, he was so okay. Like the first trip I made to Vegas actually is like 2010. I think the Venetian was the first place I ended up playing, and so like sick brag, final table two of my first three birds out there, but I cashed all three and the 1K. So I actually went with Max and ended up staying out an extra week because I did pretty well in those first three birds. But yeah, GovShark was one of the first dudes that I met out in Vegas. I never really bumped into him much after that, but I definitely knew him. He was like an online crusher at the time for sure. And so it was like kind of surreal to, it's the first time I was really meeting other online poker players at the time. So yeah, I absolutely remember Robbie. Yeah, he was crushing back then for sure. I don't know what he's up to now. I mean, he's probably stayed in the States, I would imagine. So, um, oh, word. Yeah. So anyway, sorry, getting off the topic of Pluribus. Pluribus was essentially a computer program that was developed to play 100 Big Blind Cash, and there's a 10K hand sample of hands that they played against some of the top poker regs out there. And essentially, I mean, BBZ has said this as well, and he's made a few videos about it. But he essentially says that Pluribus is the GOAT poker player right now when it comes to post flop stuff. So I think it would be good to see a lot of the lines that Pluribus takes. Like I said, it's essentially looking into one of the stronger post flop strategies that we can be reviewing pretty much. And I don't know how much I guess these guys are playing cash as opposed to MTTs. Obviously, like Pluribus would be good for 100 big blind cash, and obviously a final table would be good to watch over for the MTT guys. But there's still a lot that you can learn from Pluribus that's going to help you in your tourney game as well. So I guess you guys can let me know if you want to look over this final table or if you want to check out Pluribus. But we'll definitely be looking at both in the future. I think there's a lot of value in Pluribus. Yeah. hmm Yeah. Yeah. Like, so Lena's been in there forever. I mean, I think he's the leading online uh, poker earnings. Timothy's basically like both MTT and cash specialist. Like he's good at both. Amadi's one of the goats as well. I think he might have won a bracelet this year. Uh, yeah, yeah. European's a crusher. Fabrizio as well. Papana, Loris. Mhm. Yeah, he's been in the big stuff lately, from what I've seen anyway. So at least in these replays. So anyway, I guess if there's no preference. We can good beer pong player, nice. Yeah, sweet. Yeah. So anyway, so I guess we'll just look over this. Definitely we should look into Pluribus at some point. It's really good stuff there, but we can just look over this for now. If you guys want to get into it, we can just start going right now. Yeah, 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 yeah. I'm actually going to start the recording here as well before I forget that. So, oh, you are? All right, cool. I'll get rid of that then. All right. Well, yeah, let's get it going then anyway. So, yeah, this is just going to be cards up final table of this 10K EPT that was played pretty recently. Also, if you guys want to study this stuff on your own, the YouTube channel is let's see where it is. BCP replays, and there's just a lot of good stuff in here. This is like super valuable information to be able to see all these cards face up. So yeah, we'll just get into it. I'm wondering if I should play this at 2x speed or 1.5x. I didn't know if we want to be like talking over it in the middle of the hand or maybe just evaluate after something interesting happens. Um, Yeah, so I think a certain amount can be said here. I actually think this three bet with tens is kind of thin, especially at a final table here. I don't think this is a bounty, which would make a little bit more sense to be getting the money in here because there's a little bit more incentive to get the money in and bust somebody. But um, this might be like a little bit more of a standard three bet at just regular stages at a final table, or before the final table, but at a final table, I would assume that tens should actually be a pretty high frequency call in this spot. I would imagine this probably gets in a little bit as a three bet, but I would think low frequency. And then the Yeah, the later position might make a little bit more sense because there's less people to act, and then the later position he's in will guarantee that when he does flat, he's actually going to be able to play in position. So that might have something to do with it. I think that's actually a pretty good point. Wow, Damo's just a sicko. Yeah, so unfortunately, we don't get to see it too much of a Damo. So he just four bet jammed. No, 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 no. Yeah, and then we can look at some of that stuff. But the reason I like these online replays is because it just everything is easier to see. I mean, just with the chips and we get to see everybody's hole cards and we get to go through like a lot of hands like pretty quickly here as opposed to online coverage. Everybody plays slow. You got to get through the commentary. So pretty standard check call, I would say here. Hmm. Adamo, you gotta start saying his name right. Like I feel like you want to say Domino, like Domino bitch. Uh, Adamo, Addamo, Adamo. Gotcha. Okay, so I'll say a couple things about that. So one, it's going to be a decent play if you're playing against other top regs who are capable of having a decent three bet bluff range. If you're just playing against randoms whose three bet range is way more on the strong side than it's ever going to have like a three bet bluffing range, it would obviously be like a far worse play than it would be against somebody who has a more balanced three bet range. So against the top regs, that might make a little bit more sense to at least at some frequency be four bet jamming there. It would be an absolute disaster if you're doing it against randoms who are just going to be way more weighted towards value than bluffs. On the flip side, also when you do get called, mostly you're going to get called by hands like kings, queens, and jacks. So you at least have like it's almost better to be four bet jamming a hand like ace four suited in a spot like that than it is to be four bet jamming like nines or tens because often like you're going to have more equity against like with your overcard as opposed to being like dominated by a higher pair. So I think that's why those hands get in there. I would say that's essentially like don't try this at home kind of play. Essentially, if you're just playing against a bunch of no names as opposed to a bunch of top regs. So you just have to take thinner spots against stronger players and people who are capable of having a three bet bluffing range. So yeah, those hands do make a lot of sense there. Uh, Check raise on the turn. Um, so yeah, I don't like this jam at all. I think this is like borderline suicidal, actually. Like, I could get behind it if he had a hand like 6-5 or 6-4, because then it could be like some sort of mergy bluff. Like, he probably just takes it down a fair amount, and then when he gets called, he at least has equity when he's called. A hand like this I think is a borderline disaster. Yeah, so I think the double barrel is good with the king of clubs and the overcard. It might not be full weight, but he can definitely be pretty aggressive in this spot. I think this is a borderline punt by Loris here, so I don't think we'll talk too much more about that. He can definitely call one more in the turn and reevaluate, but I definitely like folding more than I do jamming, even though I do probably like calling a little bit more than folding. So pretty standard here. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So this just goes to show that this guy probably is a random. I mean, he's the shortest stack here, so he can't be folding hands like this. And I mean, a hand like 7-6 suited is also going to play very well multi-way. So it's a pretty poor fold on his part there. Pocket fives isn't going to be a full weight bet here, but the lower the pair, I think the more you want to be betting here. Interesting bet here on the river. He might have some showdown here too, so I also don't think this ace eight is going to be full weight here either, but probably fine. And then fives is all obviously like in a pretty tough spot. This king 10 is pretty loose here, I would say, at 20 big blinds. I mean, Timothy actually has a lot of incentive to play pretty tight here with this guy having 8.7 bigs and him being so short. I mean, it's by no means like, go ahead. Yeah, so if Vershinin, I guess, like had 20 bigs as well, I would like this open a little bit more. But him and Lena both have quite a bit of incentive to play tight here until Vershinin busts with the pay jumps being so big here. So I would definitely say this is on the loose side, but not bad by any means. I like the jam by Amadi as well. You can really put it on a lot of pressure in a spot like that. So the 9-3 clubs is kind of close, but probably fine to fold. I'm pretty sure he's still calling most any two suited cards, but I can understand him not wanting to defend big blind versus another really big stack who's opening from the tightest position at the table. So yeah. Well, this will get interesting. I'm assuming so. Loris can probably do a couple things here. Yeah, like I don't think he can do any wrong if he's three betting. He's probably three bet folding in this spot for sure. Um, this is a pretty gross spot for ace jack. I wouldn't hate a fold here, actually. I would like this fold a lot more than the 7-6 suited, actually. This is obviously a pretty tight opening spot for Amadi. And then Loris is also going to be like very strong here, calling EP1. So I don't mind the fold with the ace jack by any means. Yeah, very tight ranges here. If he had like ace jack suited, it would be really gross. Hmm. Yeah, his range is going to be very tight in that spot. I would expect an open here with the ace-7. Yeah, I can't defend the 10-4, obviously. Yep, yep. We can always pause it and go back. A little on the loose side, but it's fine. No, he can. He's got so many chips. It's fine. Be a little less incentivized to open with another big stack on the button, but it's also kind of good for him to be opening into the short stack because he's just going to be able to play pretty aggressively against the shorty who's kind of handcuffed here. Nice bluff on the river there. Yeah, let me see. Okay, so let me go back and just see this action again. So he bets here, pretty dry board. I mean, he can be pretty aggressive on this flop. Turn, he really has no equity. So although this is probably a decent card for European, um, it's not so great that he can just like bet range here. Amadi for like versus like a quarter pot on the flop, I don't think he's really allowed to fold any ace highs here. So like Amadi's gonna have some ace highs on the turn here as well. I like European's check because he really has a hand that has like zero equity. He can also be trapping hands like I think ace king's mostly gonna be betting, but hands like kings and aces can definitely work in some checks. And on the river here, his hand is essentially worth nothing. So he's really trying to put pressure on hands like 6-7 suited, pocket fives, obviously pocket eights like he has. Um, so he knows like an ace is probably never folding here, but he's going to put a lot of pressure on the rest of that range we were just talking about, like a six and then pocket pairs. So pretty sweet bet on the river by him, I'd say.
I
Yeah,
think
he's
that check on the turn makes the river bet look credible. Like it makes it more likely he has a king because it sort of seemed like the ace froze him a bit there.
yeah. So European should probably be checking the majority of his king X. I think he can still put in like a small bet with a hand like let's say king queen king jack because he's still going to get called by king 10 king 9 suited, maybe even king 8 suited. I think Amadi's going to be flatting here. So with his stronger king X's, he can definitely still bet for value and get called by worse here. But he's definitely not betting every king here full weight. Also on the turn, I don't think Amadi is just betting every single ace X he has here, mainly because Amadi really doesn't have like pocket kings or pocket aces here ever. So essentially, Europeans' range on this board is going to be stronger than the rest. So I definitely think Amadi can still have some ace X here. Um, that being said, European can still pretty credibly rep a king, but so can Amadi because Amadi's going to be checking most of his king X on the turn as well. So essentially, what's happening here is that European has a hand that he knows has 0 showdown value, and he's really trying to put pressure on 6x and pocket pairs. He essentially knows he's never getting a king to fold or an ace to fold. And even if he overbets here, like even a hand like king 9 is probably just going to call here when they're this deep. So like even when he does get called in a spot like this, or even when he bets like this, he assumes like he's never going to get raised almost ever. So it's pretty sweet for him to use this overbet here. Also, like I said, he can overbet here because he's still uncapped to like pocket sixes, pocket kings, pocket aces. Ace king is probably mostly betting on the turn here, I would imagine. But yeah, essentially Europeans mainly uncapped towards stronger hands, and Amadi's strongest hands are going to be like essentially ace queen, ace jack, king queen, stuff like that. So European definitely has a range advantage here, and he can push that his equity by betting pretty big here and really putting a lot of pressure on anything that's not a king or an ace here. Yeah, and again, he essentially can overbet in that spot because both because of the board and because of the action, European still has a pretty big range advantage and can really put the pressure on by making some really big bets there. Standard C bet here, I would say. These queen high boards aren't great for the three betters range because a lot of the callers range is going to be like a lot of ace queen suited, king queen suited, stuff like that. But you can pretty much use a high frequency C bet strategy in a lot of spots when you're in position here. So I don't mind him just betting like full range. He's also chip leader. So as the chip leader, you're really allowed to just, even when spots are mixing between bet or check, you can put on a lot of pressure just by going like full weight bet because people are just going to be playing to. Yep. Okay. Mhm. Mhm. Okay, let's do this. Let's ask the guys in here. What do you guys mainly want to do with pocket eights here on the river? And like I said, guys, all your go to the poker seminar section if you want to uh, ask us questions or respond to any of the stuff we're doing here. So just curious what you guys want to do with pocket eights here on the river. Check call flop, check check turn, and then rivering a boat. Mix depending on villain. Check and call. I'm not sure. You mean check and bet, maybe? I think the stakes I play, people don't bluff enough, and the main value I get. Yeah, so that's actually a really good point that you brought up, Found in Flood. Slow playing, like trapping, becomes more valuable for two reasons. One, when or mainly because your opponent is capable of bluffing. If your opponent is not capable of bluffing, then trapping really doesn't make a whole lot of sense because you just want to be betting for value. And also when people don't value bet thinly enough, trapping doesn't make enough sense because they're just going to be checking too much when you have good hands. But when you're playing against like stronger players, like these are at the final table here, who are capable of both value betting thinly and trapping, or no, value betting thinly and bluffing enough, then trapping becomes a better play. So anyway, I, exactly. So I think you pretty much nailed the spot, Steve. I think that he's definitely going to have like some spades that he's going to be wanting to bet for value. I think even a hand like pocket jacks with a spade can bet this river for value and potentially get hero called by a hand like ace queen, king queen, pocket tens with the spade, pocket nines with the spade, stuff like that. So you definitely are going to have some hands that villain's going to have that he's going to bet for value that are worse than yours, and you can essentially make things tough on him by and build a bigger pot for yourself by check raising versus that range. Also, Papania is still going to have hands like, let's say, ace four of diamonds, jack nine of diamonds, or whatever, like some hands that he's three betting like this. So once he gets to this river, his hand is essentially worth nothing. So he's going to have to bluff those hands on the river. And if he's just betting, then Papania easily gets to fold, whenever we bet when he has nothing. So yeah, so essentially what's happening here is that European is protecting his checking range by also having some strong hands. And when European is capable of having strong hands that he checks here, that means it's going to be tougher for Papan to bluff or value bet thinly, because if he knows his opponent can still have like the ace of spades or full houses here, then he can't just like thinly value bet a hand like pocket nines with a spade, because like, if Europeans only checking like, you know, queen X and like pocket fives of the spade, essentially not super strong hands, then it's going to be easier for Papan to both bluff and value bet because Europeans' range is just going to be too weak in the spot. So this is like a really great example of how the strongest players in the world are really disguising the strength of their hand by working in some traps here. Um, so again, it would be really thin, I would say. And then obviously, like at a final table, I think those thin value bets kind of leave your range so much because every chip is so valuable. Also, your opponents are not calling down as wide, like they're being a little more conservative at a final table, which makes a whole lot more sense. So those thin value bets might be a little bit more out of their range as opposed to if this was at a different stage of the tournament here. So yeah, I actually didn't notice that. But yeah, okay. So I'm just reading the comments here. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess that's everything that I wanted to say. Is there anything else that you wanted to add? That well, I guess I was gonna say, essentially, if Papan is playing against like some random who isn't capable of trapping good hands here, then it's gonna allow him to value bet thinly with a hand like nines because he knows that his opponent is never trapping good hands. But against a strong player like European, who's capable of still having strong hands when he checks the river here, he's not going to be allowed to value bet as thinly because he knows his opponent can still have really strong hands. So when he's in a spot where he could just like check down a hands like nines with a spade and potentially win, as opposed to bet a hand like nines with a spade and then get check raised and then being put in a super gross spot, like that becomes a really disgusting spot, and that's the kind of spots that like the top players in the world are really putting you in. Exactly. Right. Exactly. Because you see a lot of those people in the mid to small stakes tournaments. You'll see them not value bet a hand that they definitely should have value bet. So when you're trapping there, it obviously sucks because you're like, oh, how could he check there? But that's who was talking about that? I think Found and Flood was saying, yeah. So like it's good to be trapping, but against opponents who are not value betting thinly enough, it becomes a lot worst option to be trapping against players like that. And then on the flip side, you're also going to see a lot of people being like with a hand like 9 high and they just give up. You're like, oh, you're supposed to be bluffing that hand all the time. Like, how can you not bluff there? And then you just end up scooping the pot with the nuts. So against those type of players, you can just kind of play your hand face up. But against like really tough opponents, you want to be a lot more balanced in general, I would say. So, uh, right, right. Yeah. So I guess even something that I try to work on myself is just remembering that you can just play your hand kind of face up against unknown opponents or just like not very strong opponents, and that's actually going to be a better strategy than trying to play some balanced strategy. In general, like you're just allowed to play face up against bad opponents because they're not going to understand that you're playing your hand face up because they're weaker opponents. You know what I mean? So that's really something that I think I've been working on quite a bit in my own game to give yourself a little bit of a bigger win rate. So it makes less sense. I'm a loose open here if I lead up. Right, right. It's a super loose open here, but but probably fine. I would say like if European had like 100 bigs and then everybody else had like 50 or 40 or less, and that would make a little more sense. But he still has like Amadi on the button, who also is like very deep. So wow, I guarantee you see a call here by Amadi. I guarantee it. Wow. Okay. Okay. So why I was saying I guarantee I'm gonna see a three bet here or a call is because for one, they're so deep, and it's gonna be like very rare that he gets it all in here pre versus like let's say pocket jacks or pocket queens. I think Europeans gonna just call with a lot of those hands because they're so deep here. Obviously, I think Amadi knows like GTO or I mean final table strategies more than me. But I would say in general, when you're this deep with and you're essentially like third in chips, and there's all these short stacks around here. Well, I guess he's fourth in chips, but either way, there's like a lot of really short stacks here. So you're really more incentivized to play small pots, even like with really strong hands. Also, if you believe European is being like super out of line, then when you three bet here, you're just likely going to get folds when you have a really strong hand here. And obviously, you don't want that to happen when you have a nutted hand in the spot like this. So I don't hate this three bet by any means, but he's also going to put himself in a gross spot here. So, like I don't hate. Right. If everybody here was like 80 bigs effective, then it would make more sense for him to be three betting here. But when there's all these shorties, like, so that's like essentially a disaster for him to bust in eighth place there with all those short stacks there. Like, it's obviously like super unfortunate because sometimes you're just going to run kings to aces. That's just how it is. But I think in a spot like this, that probably could have been avoided. You know what I mean? Mainly just like I said, you're just really incentivized to play small ball poker, especially when you have a lot of chips and the opponent you're playing against has you covered. Then you also get to disguise the strength of your hand, with a really strong hand. Yeah, I think it was. So honestly, don't love this donk lead here. I understand why I understand why he's doing it, but I think this would make more sense if Lena was opening from an earlier position where he's not going to have a lot of these 5-4 suited, 8-7 suited, stuff like that. When on the button, he's going to have a much, even though he's like pretty short, his opening range is going to be wider and he's going to have like a lot more pocket fives, pocket fours, 6-7 suited than he would from early position. So, like, I think this lead in theory is probably okay, and maybe it does get in here a little bit. But from these positions, I don't like it nearly as much, just because Lena's going to have more of this board from the button than he ever would from like low jack and earlier. Plus, he just has all the chips, so he can just kind of say "fuck you," like I'm going to do whatever here. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And European's such a beast. Like he studies super hard too. So if he's doing it, it probably gets in there. You know what I mean? Yeah. Oh, with Pete. With Pete. He won something where he got free coaching from him, and I guess it took a long. This is a pretty sweet jam here, I would say, actually. Um, so it almost kind of seems like a little suicidal here with two other 10 big blind stacks here. But it's kind of okay because European's just going to be opening so much here. So he probably just gets a lot of folds in this spot here. He's also opening from a later position, so his range is going to be even wider than it would be if he was opening from EP. So I think, like from a GTO perspective, this hand's going to be like a full weight jam. I'd be interested to see if there was some way to set it up when you have these other two 10 big blind stacks, how much this jam gets in there. But I think this is like I don't have anything negative to say about this. Like I said, mostly it's going to be a jam. I wonder what the dynamic's going to be with the other two 10 big blind stacks here. Right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously, like the earlier positioning opens, the tighter your jam range needs to be. But I also I was gonna say I like it because a hand like Pocket Twos plays like pretty poorly post flop. So, um, like I don't mind him just trying to take it down right there. Um, but I guess the flip side is it's also a pretty easy hand to play post flop because you either flop a set of deuces or you don't. So, interesting open here. Like this open size definitely gets in here, for sure. You don't see a lot of people doing this with hands, like randoms doing this with hands other than aces and kings. Like they don't balance their range out here. But a guy like Timothy is definitely going to have like, let's say some ace three suited, ace four suited that he's going to be bluffing with here. Also, like even though it looks so obvious that he has like a really strong hand here, like European still has to defend with a hand like king nine suited. You know what I mean? Even if like he knows he has aces, like he still has to defend with a hand like king nine suited. So it does look obvious, but like I said, you right, right, exactly. Very loose am here with the eight deuce off, I would say. He's probably allowed to fold like the bottom 5 to 10% of his range here. Like I understand what he's doing. There's other shorties around, and he doesn't want to bust this hand, but like eight deuce off is probably like just a little too wide to be doing this with here. Adamo, Adamo. You're putting in an extra syllable. There it is. There it is. He got that. Right, right, right. Um, no idea. Oh, it looks like a little Pokemon or something like that. Oh, word. Nice. Uh, mhm. Yeah, nice. Okay, so Pabritz opened and European called. And Pabritz check called, flop and turn here, and then River went check check. So I guess any comment on that from you or the rest of the guys in here? Yeah. Okay. So there's that aspect, but Europeans still also going to have Queen Jack, King Queen, Ace Queen, Pocket Nines. So like even though he has trips here, he's still going to be behind some hands, and it's also good for him to be pot controlling here. Even though again he has trips, he doesn't really want to blow the pot. Like he's not going to be excited to get in, 65 plus bigs here. What's that? Yeah. Plus, with him holding the ten of spades, he's gonna like if he decided to go bet, he's gonna be blocking a lot of hands like ace ten of spades, jack ten of spades, which obviously makes it straight on the turn. So basically, like hands that are gonna call him like with like some sort of flush draws. He ends up blocking that part of his range. So it's gonna be tougher for him to get called by worse. So yeah, I think that's good. Also, European's going to put on some pressure here. I think like the lower the pairs here, the more you want to be turning your hand into a bluff. So I actually like the double barrel with the pocket threes. I don't think it gets in there like full weight double barrel, but essentially the worse your pair is, the more you want to be bluffing. So yeah, that said, and he also doesn't want to just be bloating a pot here. With a guy who has a ton of chips here. So even though he does have trips, he's not necessarily trying to play for stacks here. So yeah, pretty interesting spot here, I would say for sure. And then if he has like a hand like king queen or ace queen on the flop, he probably like check raises a little bit more versus bet as opposed to having a weaker queen there. Probably got to defend here. I wouldn't be surprised if this guy folds. Yep. So I don't know how this guy got in this tournament. I'm assuming it was the satellite. So should be a fold. Yep. Fortunately, Lena's been a little quiet, but he's been pretty short stacked and handcuffed. So yeah. So essentially, I mean, Fabrizio has a lot of chips here, so he can be pretty active. Also, the shorter your stack gets, the more you're required to be defending here, mainly because you have such a large percentage of your stack in the middle already. And also, the shorter the stack you are, the easier it's going to be to stack off with a lot of one pair type hands. So, essentially, the shorter you get, the wider you need to be defending here. And especially with him being by far the shortest stack here, like he just can't afford to be passing up on spots like this. Like, there's really no um, pay jumps that he has to worry about because he is the short stack. Like everybody's waiting on him to bust. The more he folds spots like this, like the harder it's going to be for him to get back into the tournament. So essentially, the shorter you get, the more you need to be defending. And when you have an ace in your hand like this, like you definitely need to be defending here. Also, like if you flop an ace, chances are pretty good your opponent's going to be putting a lot of pressure on you a spot like that because you're just going to be getting in a lot of your good ace x hands pre-flop. So when you do hold an ace here and the board comes ace high, your opponent should be putting on a lot of pressure, which is great when you actually have an ace here. So yeah, pretty poor fold, I would say here. Mhm. Is is less reverse implied odds the shorter you get, and it's easier to stack off with like a one pair hand when you're shorter stacked as opposed to being bigger stacked. That's why the shorter you get, the more you defend. Essentially, he can play closer to Chip EV being the shortest stack because nobody's like there's no incentive for him to wait for somebody else to bust. He's by far the shortest stack. So he's essentially able to play a more chip EV kind of strategy, even though we're at a final table here. Yeah, I paused this one right here as well because this is a pretty gangster three bet. I mean, I was just saying earlier that with when he opened with the pocket aces with 10 bigs, like obviously he has aces and you want to be doing that with a hand like that, but he's also going to be capable of having some bluffs in that range where most regular like to mediocre players are just going to have like the nuts and nothing else. So we see another spot here where he has like 16 or 17 bigs and he's essentially three bet bluffing with a hand like ace five suited. Like he's not going to be three bet calling this off if European decides to jam. He also knows European is opening super wide here. So even though he makes it a super small size, he still probably has some fold equity because this hand is going to be like aces and kings and then a hand like ace five suited like he has here. So this three bet range is going to be very, very narrow here. And it's actually pretty extra spot to be doing this. And even though this is so small, I think European still has to fold here because he essentially just has such a poor hand. Right. Well, he essentially has to make it that size because he's three bet folding there. So yeah, and you see this stuff more at final tables than you would at like mid stages of the game. I think it makes a lot less sense at that point. So I assumed it was limped. I can't. I'm actually very shocked. I'm very shocked to see him defending this hand. I don't think this is not good at all. Also, on the flip side, like not only like is this a hand you probably shouldn't be defending, but Loris's range should be like very tight opening here. We've got a five big blind stack here, so again he has a lot of incentive to just be folding until Vershinin ends up busting. So not only like should this hand not be a defend and like a chip EV situation, but this is like almost lighting money on fire, I think, here when he's defending versus a range that should just be like super, super tight here. So, you know, I I just can't get behind that defend at all. Again, European probably knows these spots better than I do, but I would love to hear his point of view from defending that spot here. Oh, how does aces hold there? So I'm gonna assume he's gonna open the button here. Pan is probably going to defend or three bet. Yeah. Again, he's very not incentivized to be bloating pots here out of position, but I don't think you're like that upset if you have to three bet fold a hand like King Jack off, as opposed to if you had like a hand like King Queen suited or Ace Jack suited, stuff like that, which is just like really gross. Also, those hands play a lot better post flop, so I would expect to be flatting more with those. But yeah, this is fine. I mean, he probably mixes here. I would assume without a diamond, he's probably going to be checking here quite a bit. Oh, he goes for it. So, which I also don't hate. Again, as a chip leader, you can like put on a ton of pressure here. So even though a spot may be mixed, he probably leans more towards taking the more aggressive route, which I think is fine. Oh, this one. Um, PV it is, but the final table, it's probably just a fold here. Again, like he does have him covered. Like yeah, he has position, but um, this spot, this hand's pretty close in general, I would say. And we have like four really short stacks here, so if this spot is like close, I'm probably just gonna end up mucking it. I don't think there's like it's like super sad to have to fold here by any means. So I think if we were playing chip EV, this hand would mix flat and three bet, but I don't hate the fold in this spot. This is him just being aware of the table dynamics, basically, with the other shorties out there. Right, right. Mm-hmm. Gonna get through. This should get through as well. He did defend here. Okay. Probably a bit on the loose side, I would say here. Again, because Loris's range should be fairly tight, even though he's opening from the cutoff, he can be fairly wide here, but he does have some incentive to wait for Vershinin and Lena to potentially bust. Right. I'm gonna look at this. That's also a pretty good point. He checked the flop here, which is probably fine. So I was gonna say another thing. So a lot of times you'll see boards that are going to be pretty high frequency bet when you're just playing like chip EV. But at a final table, you when you're the shorter stack, you're going to be mixing in some more checks than you normally would be. And that's just essentially because you don't like your opponent can really put a lot of pressure on you here. So it's kind of worse to be putting in money with the weaker part of your range or like the thinner value parts. So although this is normally a pretty high frequency bet on a board like this, I would say I don't hate his check back because of the final table dynamic. His hand needs like very little protection in this spot as well, so it would really suck if he got check raised. No. On the turn, I mean, it's it's fine. I mean, again, this hand doesn't need a ton of protection. He also is disguising his hand fairly well. Like if Fabrice comes to the river with a hand like, 8-6 of clubs, or even a hand like, 10-5 of diamonds, just some random stuff like that, he's probably gonna have to bluff the river a fair amount. So like he puts himself in an easy situation if he checks twice that he can just call like essentially any river bet size. Also, he's probably only playing one street with his hand, if I had to guess. So he can either bet that street on the turn or on the river. Again, like you probably could bet two streets here, but you want to be betting thinly a little bit less when you're playing at a final table, and especially when there's two other short stacks here. So more passive strategies make a lot more sense in a spot like this. So I don't hate the check on the turn. I think you can probably bet too, but um, yeah, it's probably fine for him to just be checking back here. And I also think this bet size is probably not great. Like his hand is pretty much the nuts at this point. Like, yes, Fabrizio can probably still have some traps, but his hand is just like worth quite a bit there. And let's say like Fabrizio is still going to have to defend like a 9, a 7, a 4, and they're probably all going to have to call even versus like 130k here on the river. So I think his hand is worth a little bit more value than he's showing in the spot here, but it's not too bad. He should if he's playing properly. I mean, he should definitely still have some traps here because let's say Loris is going to have to value bet a hand like pocket jacks, and like if Fabrizio never has a queen here, then he can just like easily value bet like even a hand as thinly as like 9x or 7x here on the river if he knows his opponent never has a queen. But if his opponent does have a queen, it's a lot harder for to value bet hands like that. And then also if Fabrizio has like a queen here and he checks, he's able to like check jam here as opposed to like if this gets to the river, he can just bet between like 130 and like 210k here, as opposed to if he checks here and Loris does this, he can check jam and really put Loris in a super gross spot here with pocket jacks. You know what I mean? Right. Right. And from Breetz's point of view, he can be playing for a bigger pot than if he just ended up betting the river here always. So I think he would definitely mix with the queen here on the river. Yeah, minus like pocket. Well, so Pabrit probably never has pocket nines, never has pocket queens. He probably jams sevens, although it might be kind of close. Again, like Loris's range should still be pretty tight here, but I think sevens probably gets in there. Maybe he can start I don't know. He's probably jamming most pairs here. Uh, except for like pocket queens, pocket kings, pocket aces. He's probably three betting non all in. So yeah, I'd say Fabrizio is never has like queens, nines, and sevens, but he's also uncapped to queen nine suited, queen seven suited. Uh, what else? Maybe pocket fours. Like I said, if that doesn't jam, he could still get to the river with that. So I'd say Loris is a little bit more capped once he checks two streets here. So yeah, I would say Fabrizio's range could may not be stronger than Loris's, but it could contain more nuts. You know what I mean? Yeah. Correct. Correct. So even though there's so much information to study out there with final tables, there's still just so many random dynamics that like people just haven't been able to pinpoint. Mhm. From Loris's standpoint, so so I mean I don't hate a bet. It could definitely get in there, but let's say like essentially his check becomes better when he has hands like King Jack of clubs, King Queen of clubs, King Ten of clubs, because those are essentially like the like best non-pair hands he can have there. So like a lot of times he's just gonna have Pan absolutely crushed in a spot like this if both players don't have a pair here. So like in general, I would be like more incentivized to bet a hand like 10-9 of clubs here because that hand has less showdown value. Like his King Jack can definitely be good here. He also disguises some flush draws that he can have here on the flop. So although I think he probably can bet, I definitely like the check in this spot because he can definitely have the best hand with King High. Um, Also, Papan can be bluffing turns with worse draws that Loris has absolutely dominated. So he keeps those worse hands in Papan's range by checking. So I think you can do either or here. What becomes interesting is I think we saw a check fold versus a bet here. And also, I think if you're checking flop here, I don't think betting turn makes a whole lot of sense either because essentially he's checking flop because his hand has a fair amount of showdown value here. So this eight, I don't think changes a lot of things either. So I think if he's checking the flop, he should probably be checking the turn as well because he's checking the flop because he doesn't want to get check raised. Like those factors still apply on the turn. They're actually apply even more on the turn because this eight brings another flush draw. So there's actually more draws that Papang could play a little bit more aggressively on the turn as opposed to on the flop. So I don't really understand if he's checking flop why he's betting turn. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So Papan following the turn, like I guess he's just saying that he assumes that he's going to be betting this flop pretty aggressively. So when he checks, he's just like, "Oh, this guy has some sort of showdown value," which is kind of true. But I think this like 9-8 is just like for this size, you have to call here. Like this is not good. You know what I mean? So yeah, and even I would even consider versus like two-thirds on the turn would be like a hero fold with an eight in that spot. But for like the small size, I think it's a pretty big mistake to be folding there. Like if you're gonna defend 9-8 off and fold for that size, like you just shouldn't be defending 9-8 off. So did this go check back here on the flop? I can actually save this for another point if we want. No, no, no. The yeah. This, and I mean, even though there are a ton of solvers and ways to study out there, like there's still a ton of value in watching like how some of the best players in the world are playing here. Well, this is gonna get called. Oh shit! So he's just gonna call here, and it's gonna be interesting to see what Papan does here. Like I'm assuming he's going to raise not all in here. Probably like 750 if I had to guess. He might just click it. I mean, this is so yeah. This is kind of crazy because like essentially, I don't know, like if he has ace king here, like okay, so there's already 700 in there. So maybe he doesn't have like any click back folds. Like I don't know, like if he let's say Papan has ace queen suited here himself. Does he like I don't know if you just call here with ace queen. I don't think you do. I think it's gonna have to be like you're either folding or you're putting in more money. I don't think you have an overcalling range here. So aces, yeah. Um, I want to say that Fabrizio is probably going to be just calling the majority of his range here. Like he could even call like ace king off, and then if Papan like just rips over the top, he might even be able to hero fold a hand like ace king off in a spot like that, mainly because Papan's range is going to be so tight himself. Like, yeah, he might have ace king as well, but I don't think Papan should really be ripping like ace queen himself in a spot like this, mainly because I mean, Fabrizio's range should be fairly tight calling off here. I mean, I think like the absolute weakest hands he's going to be flatting here are maybe like ace jack suited and let's say pocket nines, pocket eights is kind of close. Maybe even sevens gets kind of close as well. But yeah, it's just so this is kind of crazy. I might actually like take the spot in ICMizer. Yeah, I think Fabrizio is definitely flatting the majority of his range here. I mean, if he's going to be raising, he's going to be raising not all in. So I think he would click it if anything, because like it's such a disaster if he has ace queen and then like European or Papan wakes up with like kings or aces here. So I think for the most part, especially at a final table, in Fabrizio's range, he's probably going to be calling the majority of his range in this spot. I just don't think there's a lot that you accomplish by raising a hand like that because you're getting like most worse hands to fold as opposed to like I mean, even if Papan has like pocket tens in the spot, he probably just folds. You know what I mean? Because like I just don't see a lot of I don't see a lot of benefits to jamming here because like when you jam and he gets called, like even if he has ace king, he's never getting it in good. Like he's essentially getting it in versus like queens plus. So there's like the one spot where like because I think even if he jams here, like Papan's folding jacks. Like he should be anyway. So like essentially when he rips and he gets called, he's flipping versus queens, and then he's dominated by kings and aces. So that's how tight I think the ranges here are. So I think the reach probably just. No, but I think that's even kind of the same thing because even if I like click it with ace king, in Fabriz's spot, and then I see Papan like go over the top, I'm probably like hero folding there because like I said, I don't think Papan is ever doing it with like ace queen or even like pocket tens, pocket jacks. I think probably just ends up making a hero fold in that spot. So I really think just like clicking it in general probably doesn't make a lot of sense in a spot like this, mainly because of the final table dynamic. So, and just how tight ranges are going to be. So you can essentially just call your entire range and then even hero fold spots like let's say Fabrizz has like pocket jacks, pocket tens, and then he sees Papan come over the top. Like I think like jacks and tens and like ace queen are like super easy folds in that spot. And it's just like a lot easier to just like call and just fold versus more action and just only like lose 8 or 9 bigs as opposed to like clicking it and losing a lot more chips and having to hero fold a lot of other spots. So I think when ranges are this tight, you probably are just like pure calling here, and that's essentially why like Papan, like you see him just jamming here because there's just like no like click folds that he's going to have in this spot. Like you're either playing for your stack or you're not, and ranges are just going to be so tight that essentially he's just going to have like queens plus ace king in the spot. You know what I mean? So I don't think there's like a whole lot of benefit to um like raising at all. I think you probably just want to be like calling mostly. Definitely a weird spot. I'll probably run that in ICMizer to see what's best. Blade shove there actually. Timothy and Loris are going to have to call super tight with Lena being so short. Also, the main benefit that you want to see here is that when called, when Papan's called, like he's going to be called by. It sucks when he's called by a pair because obviously he's dominated by that, but his hand also, has a lot of potential to busting a lot of pairs. Also, if anybody calls it like ace king, ace queen, a hand like 9-8 suited has pretty good equity versus hands like that. So, not only does he just like win the pot a lot here, but when he's called, his hand has pretty good equity, even versus like over pairs in a spot like this. So, yeah, I like this jam. I think any more than 25 bigs, it probably becomes a little bit spewy, but I think this is probably fine. Right. Right. This is essentially just what you get to do when you have a lot of chips at a final table, and like the other part is a super short stack. So those mediocre stacks are definitely going to be calling like super tight in a spot like this. This is going to be pure call. Or, I was going to say pure call or fold. I wouldn't hate. I think jamming would be an absolute disaster with eights in a spot like this. So even though Papan can be super wide, like he's not raise calling like pocket sevens here. So when you jam with eights, you're either getting called by an overpair or ace king, and like you're not very happy in a spot like that. Yeah, I would probably flat too, but I can definitely get behind why he ended up folding. You can see here Papan, even though like he's got a flush draw and 2 overs here. He's playing very cautiously versus European. I mean, European can still have, all the nuts. He can have a lot of 2 pairs sets, and then just like put a lot of pressure on him in general. And he's really disincentivized to bloat a pot versus the chip leader here. So also the board probably better for European than it is for Papan anyway. So mhm. Assuming we're going to see a flat here mostly, and Timothy's probably going to come along as well. I have no idea what this lead is here. So Papan seems pretty well versed flop, but I've questioned a lot of the stuff that he's done post flop. I mean, in general, I think I can get behind this. Like, if you're gonna have a leading range, a lot of the small blinds calling range is gonna be a lot of like suited Broadway stuff. So I think I understand, like in theory, why he's making this bet. Also, like he can't like check call with a hand like this if he faces a bet. I don't think it's strong enough. So deciding to just like kind of like merge, value bet slash bluff this hand, I don't think is like that bad. So I guess I don't hate this. This probably does get in there a little bit. The other thing is he probably has pocket tens here too. Like he's not trying to like three bet a hand like tens in a spot like this. I don't think. So I don't hate this at all. Mhm. Right. So I'm trying to think. I think we were talking about a hand. I don't remember who I was talking about it with. It was either you or one of the other members, but it's a multi-way spot. I think where we were talking about a check raise range. I think, and I think I was mentioning that most people don't raise multi-way like thinly enough. Like they're mostly just gonna have like let's say queen 10 plus and then like super strong draws like king jack of diamonds stuff like that. So the fact that you see him like I guess this looks kind of thin, but I think it's pretty blade. I mean, if Papan decides to come along, then essentially European is probably just going to slow down in general and just kind of give up, I think, or just be okay with like showing down. And then also he can probably pretty easily get it in with Timothy, with how many chips he has. Like he's not excited to do it, but it's not like a huge disaster. I think Timothy could still have worse Queen X here, and also like Jack Nine, King Jack that he might end up jamming here. So his hand can definitely be the best hand and could also get some protection here. And he's also incentivized to put in a raise to try to narrow down the amount of players that he's playing against here. Like it's pretty, for one, it's Blade if he just takes the pot down now. And for two, if he can like go to the turn against one opponent instead of two, I think that benefits his hand as well. So this is a pretty sweet raise, I would say, in general. And I think what I was talking about in the other spot is that you just don't see people doing it thinly enough, like Europeans doing there. I think most people are just going to be calling in a spot like that, where I think raising actually has a lot more benefit. Big fold there with the 9-4 suited, I think. But probably okay. Again, he's disincentivized to be putting in chips with Lena being so small. There's a 24K pay jump here, so um, Loris did versus with 9-4 suited versus the button, I think. Mhm. Yeah, with the other shorties, or with Lena only having like six bigs for sure. Yeah, Preacher, we're gonna be wrapping this up here anyway in just a second, so you're not gonna miss a whole lot more, and everything's gonna be recorded anyway. So yeah, all right, cool. Yeah, thanks for joining, Preacher, too, and everyone else. We got pretty good numbers in here. I'm happy to see that today. Hope you guys are digging this. And hopefully once Pete gets back to Costa Rica, he'll we can get him in these as well. Yes, yes, that will be happening again pretty soon. So yes, sir. I think he's gonna mix bet and check here on the turn as well. Well, so essentially when he bets small like this, he's allowed to still have bluffs in his range. Like let's say if he has a hand like Queen Nine with a heart, um, say Queen Jack, if he has like three deuce of hearts here, random stuff like that, it essentially allows him to have more of a bluffing range. Like if you're just jamming here on the turn, then it's going to be harder for you to have like weaker bluffs. So by betting the small, he's going to be able to have like some bet folds here, which is going to allow him to have more of a bluffing range than if he's just like jamming here on the turn. And I would assume a player like Timothy is definitely capable of having weaker hands than just a 10 here. So, and this essentially allows or makes things tough for European because he's going to have to call like or defend a wider range versus these smaller bets as opposed to a Timothy just jams and then he can just like call with his good hands and then fold his weaker hands. So yeah, this is pretty blade here. And I think this is probably just like I wouldn't hate if he just checked here because he does unblock flush draws, which may have to end up bluffing. Like, let's say European has a hand like Jack 8 of hearts here, and Timothy checks here on the river. He's probably going to have to jam on the river versus check because Timothy is still going to have some give ups in a spot like that. So, yeah, let's say Timothy has a hand like Queen 9 with Queen of Hearts, and he gives up here on the river, and then European has a hand like Jack 8 of Hearts. He probably has a bluff there because if he just checks and loses to Queen 9 of Hearts, it's such a disaster. So, I would assume a 10 probably checks at some frequency on this river here. Definitely an interesting spot here, though, for sure. Right. And yeah, I think it was like between that and half, I think. But either way, like we were talking about how he's capable of having bluffs. And if he's capable of having bluffs, like he can't just bluff every single one in the river. Like I said, if he had Queen 9 with Queen of Hearts and the river doesn't come with a heart, he's probably just going to be giving up there. So if he's going to have, give ups in that spot, then he should probably be checking some strong hands too. Because if he's just checking, or if he's betting all of his 10x and just checking with his give ups, then European can essentially like close his eyes and just bet any two cards, and Timothy's just always going to fold. So I definitely think he should be trapping with some stronger hands there as well if he's going to have bluffs in that spot. Here, I wouldn't be surprised to see a call by Lena because European's going to be so wide here, or this gangster 3 bet. Right, right. And I think the 3 bet is good too. Again, European knows that Lena can have bluffs here. So I think 3 betting is good in this spot for sure. I also think calling is good here too because European's range is just going to be so wide that when you do 3 bet or if you jam, European's just going to fold so much, which is obviously a pretty big disaster when you have a hand like Pocket Kings. So I think if a guy like Lena, who is clearly capable of having 3 bet bluffs here, I think it's good for him to be 3 betting here. And then I also think it's good to be calling here as well because European's range is just going to be so wide here, and when he does 3 bet, he's just going to get so many folds here. So I think I like 3 betting and calling quite a bit in the spot. Right. Let's do one more decent spot, and then we'll wrap it up here. Oh, this is a punt of a call. Not even for chip EV. This is not a call. So I don't think so. I haven't been too impressed with Loris's play this entire tournament. So no, no, definitely. I like the non all in. Yeah. Again, like at a final table, you are more in. So essentially at final tables here too, you are even though like it's not a losing play to jam here, but it's not the optimal play. Especially when you're in the earliest position, like you have every single player to go through. So the chances of you running into a good hand are a little stronger here. So it might be a little better to just have a raise folding range. Also, you want to be jamming like a lot less in a spot like this because when you do get called, like it's a pretty big disaster when there's also like a lot of other like there's 2 other pretty short stacks here. So your hand's also like pretty strong here as well. So I think like just opening is fine. Also, when you open here, there's a better chance like someone like European or Papan like jams with the worst hand as opposed to if you jam here that they're gonna call you off with the worst hand. You know what I mean? So I think there's a lot more incentive to raise not all in at a final table as there is in like the early to mid stages of a tournament. Hmm. Um, I mean, it's less bad, I think, to be jamming in the hijack or the cutoff because there's less players that you have to go through. But also, pocket nines is a pretty strong hand, so it kind of sucks when you like rip and just get folds. Um, I guess it does kind of make more sense too because if you are jamming from a later position, then you should in general have a weaker range, so the chances of you getting called by a worse hand are gonna go up, as opposed to if you jam from EP and like somebody else calls you, like because your range is stronger, so they're gonna be calling you tighter in a spot like that. So I wouldn't hate it. I think it would make more sense if you were from a later position. But then again, like if you're on the button too with pocket nines, I would probably just be opening because your range is going to be a lot wider. And pocket nines on the button is like a very, very strong hand. Also, the chances of your opponent jamming a hand like ace four or pocket threes are going to be a lot greater if you're just raising from the button as opposed to like if you're raising from the low jack here and then it gets to the small to big blind. They have like pocket threes, pocket fours, ace four suited. So I think it makes more sense to actually, even though you have less players to go through on the button, I think the chances of your opponent like three bet jamming a worse hand than your pocket nines goes up quite a bit. So I actually just like opening this hand essentially in every spot, even though I think there's reasons to be jamming from other spots as well. So yeah, let's do one more decent one here, I guess. This is just gonna jam here. Wow, snap the ace three. So yeah, I think like okay, so for 14 bigs, yeah, obviously Chippy V, this is a snap call. It might not even be terrible at a final table. Like Timothy's still going to be jamming quite wide. There's a chance that this is probably losing. Like I might, for my offsuit ace X's, I might be like ace five to ace seven off, and then be folding like ace six through ace four off. I think ace three suited, like any suited ace, probably has to snap call. There's a chance that ace three might actually be a fold here. I mean, Loris is technically the shortest stack, so there's less ICM implications for him. Also, if he doubles up here, like Timothy is super short and Loris is right back in the game. So this is like it's not a snap, but it might also not be losing. I'd say this is probably like a very break even kind of call. And when you're playing against players as strong as this field here, I probably like this call a lot more than if like we're a strong player at a table with five randoms. You know what I mean? So this call might actually be fine. I think it's very close to like a break even kind of call. But I was just surprised to see him snap. So yeah, so I guess we'll wrap it up on this one anyway. And yeah, I'll actually just leave it here. We can either finish this final table later, if you guys want to do that, or we could look over something else for the next study session that we do. I guess I'll leave that up to you guys and what you want to do. Also, if you guys have any suggestions for what you want to do in the future when it comes to these review sessions, please let us know. We want to bring you guys, the content that you want to see, as well as maybe introducing you to some stuff that maybe you're unfamiliar with or unaware that even exists, like Pluribus. So yeah. Mhm. Right, and we can just like I said, if you guys want to post those in the Discord, we can actually just pull that up and we'll all look over them at once. I know we've just been answering them, as you guys have been sending them, because again, we do want to encourage you guys to be posting in the hand discussion section, and we'll definitely throw in our 2 cents, even if it's not for the review. But we can also just take, if you guys post enough hands, we can just go over all you guys' questions and share these hand histories in another review. I see Found and Flood said they are the bottom two stacks. Does that allow a loose, a shove, or a call? I think for the shover is always going to be one who's allowed to be looser because it's always going to be um, like not necessarily a stronger play, but you always want to be the one shoving as opposed to calling. Like in each situation, like you're going to need to be tighter as a caller as opposed to the shover. So it's always going to make more sense to be aggressive from the shover's point of view because the caller has to be so much tighter in a final table as opposed to the mid to early stages of a tournament. But that being said, based on the stack distributions and the players involved, a player may be able to call a little bit more loosely in one position as opposed to another position. So in general, you have to be tight as the caller at final tables, but depending just how tight you are allowed to call will be determined on the table dynamics, the stack distributions from other players, your stack, the player jamming. So there's a lot of factors here in play. And that's why it's good to be looking over these final tables, really. So, and correct. Yeah, because he would essentially be like middle of the pack, and then if he calls and loses with a hand that's like super close in the first place, like he's going to be bottom of the pack. So there's way less incentive for him to be calling in a spot like that, as opposed to if he's a shorty and he doubles up, he's going to be right back into the game, and then pretty much the other guy is essentially going to have 1 foot out the door. So it would make a lot more sense to be calling as a shorter stack as opposed to if he had like 30 bigs and he was calling it like a 18 big jam. You're playing a little bit more chippy V because there's less incentive for you to wait for the next player to bust because you are the shortest stack. So essentially, everybody else is like waiting for you to bust, and you're the one who needs to be making a move. Now, that doesn't mean you can necessarily call or jam as wide as you would at other stages of the tournament, but there's less ICM in your spot as the short stack as opposed to if you're like one of those middle of the pack stacks waiting for the other shorties to bust. So you'll be playing a more chip EV kind of style. Even though you won't be playing pure chip EV, you're going to be playing more chip EV than other players are at the table. Right. Yeah. And any other questions you guys want to ask us before we wrap it up here? Yes. These guys are the best of the best out there right now. Oh yeah, all these guys are in here like crazy. Like look at Pocket Fives. You'll see a lot of these guys like right up top. I mean, at least the ones that have Pocket Fives accounts anyway. So uh, again, like if you guys want to check out this site, it's BCP Replays, and there's a lot of these final table replays that you can just see for free. There's also you can watch some of the high stakes cash game players with hold cards face up. So the fact that this information is out there and it's free, like there's a lot of value in it. Now, what I will say is that there's probably a little bit more value for somebody like Steve and I who have studied a little bit more because it's kind of easier for us to like figure out why they're doing what they're doing as opposed to somebody who's like just new to the game seeing what they're doing. Like there's a difference between seeing what they're doing and understand why they're doing it. You know what I mean? So if we're able to come in here and kind of break down why they're doing what they're doing, it will make you it'll make it a little easier for you guys to understand that and then incorporate that into your game as well. Because a lot of people are out there just clicking buttons because they're clicking buttons like with no rhyme or reason, pretty much. Like we always want to find reasons for doing the things that we're doing out there. Hmm. Or bluffing enough. Yeah. And sorry, I was going to say another thing that we can do is we can review, let's say the Sunday Mill, where you're going through like a 6,000 player or I don't know how many are in the Sunday Mill, like 10K players or whatever. So like, yeah, you're still going to have some regs at the final table, but you're also going to have a lot of satellite winners, a lot of non-professional like recreational players making the final tables. So it will also be good to see maybe some mistakes that recreational players are making at final tables and kind of dissecting that as opposed to just watching like the best of the best who are just mainly making the best plays possible. I mean, you can even see in this 10K final table, like, I don't know for sure because I haven't run the spots, but I'm pretty sure I saw a few mistakes from some guys out there that I would say are like pretty large mistakes. So if the best players in the world are still capable of doing this, and like, Steve makes mistakes every day, I make mistakes every day, that's fine. Every player does. But the point is to minimize those mistakes. So if we can actually see like some final tables where there are, players, playing spots that are like, completely out of bounds, and when there's these super high pay jump final table dynamics going on, I think that'll bring a lot of value to you guys as well. So we'll look into that in the future too. Right. Every day. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it, guys. Like the turnout today too. So see you on Tuesday. See you guys.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Yep, appreciate it. Later.